Hey everyone, welcome back to Girls Guide to the Military. This week we're talking about reasons why people decide not to join the military. I did a video that I'll link to in the description so that you can go back and listen to reasons why people do join the military and think about the pros and cons and see if maybe the military is right for you or maybe it isn't. So let's dive in with number 1, medical disqualification. One of the most common reasons that people don't join the military is because they are not medically qualified. If you're considering joining the military and you have asthma, you have back problems, you've had a kidney stone in the last year, or any other numerous medical reasons that you might not be able to be in the military, you could be disqualified from military service no matter how much you want to serve in the military. It's estimated that approximately 75% of Americans today cannot serve in the military. Many people can't serve in the military because of the height and weight requirement, because they're overweight and don't meet the standards. So if you're joining the military, make sure that you are open and upfront with your recruiter about any medical issues that you're concerned about. This can save you a lot of time and energy by finding out upfront if the medical issue you're facing requires a waiver or doesn't even offer a waiver, and you can go through the process of looking into getting that waiver cleared before you even take your time to go to MEPS. What is MEPS? MEPS is the military processing center that you go to get your medical physical done. It's an all-day process and you get everything checked, your hearing, your vision. They look at all your medical files and then they have you strip down to your bra and underwear and you do different exercises to show flexibility, and then you also do a examination with the doctor one-on-one. So that's MEPS, and we'll talk more in detail about MEPS. I'm going to make a whole video on what to expect when you go to MEPS, but that's the medical clearance that you need to get. And so everyone who's in the military, officer enlisted, it doesn't matter, you have to go to MEPS and get cleared medically to serve in the military. So if you have medical concerns, make sure you let your recruiter know and that you can work through that hurdle from the get-go, because that's a big disqualification for many people who want to serve in the military. So let's move on to number 2, needing a high school diploma. One thing you may or may not know is that the military requires a high school diploma. There are waivers for different situations, such as being homeschooled, but getting your GED, there's limits on how many people can be in the military, and so if you don't have a high school diploma, you need to make sure that your recruiter knows that, and so that way they can work with you to see if you can still qualify to serve in the military. Let's move on to number 3, deployment. Some people do not want to join the military because they might deploy overseas, and since we are currently at war and there's a possibility of deploying, it is something that you should think about and consider, because when you sign up to serve in the military, you commit to doing whatever they ask of you. And just because the conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq are dwindling down doesn't mean that there couldn't be another conflict where you may have to go and serve overseas. And so that's something that you really need to think about and consider when you're considering joining the military. I deployed to Afghanistan with the Army, even though I served in the Air Force, and that's just one example of how the military has total control over what you do, and even to the point where you deploy with a branch that you're not even serving in. If you're concerned about deploying, you can read a lot of blog posts on my blog about my experience being deployed. Or if you have questions about deployment, put them down in the comments and I can work to answer them. I think that there are a lot of good and bad things about deploying, and one of the most negative being dying overseas, because that's a very real possibility. I think that if you're able to come home from a deployment, some of the things you learn from a deployment can really help you. But deploying is something that is really important to think about and to discuss when considering joining the military. And let's move on to number 4, which is family or friends talk you out of serving in the military. So one of the reasons that you might not end up signing up to serve in the military is because when you go home from speaking with the recruiter and you tell your family, they might try and dissuade you because of some of the negative things that there are about being in the military. We already talked about deployment, but there's also moving away from family and friends and not having control over your life. And sometimes people are worried, especially with young women, to join the military because they just want to protect them and they want to make sure that they make the right decision. So that is one of the main reasons that I created this channel. Some of the women that I have talked to over the last few years said that my girl's guide to the military was the only thing they could find on the internet focused on women serving in the military, and their family and friends had tried to dissuade them from serving, and even though they had walked away from deciding to serve in the military or were having second thoughts, the guide that I created helped them in their journey of deciding if they wanted to be in the military or not. And so this channel is meant as a way to help you if you need someone outside your family and friends to give you information if you don't have someone to talk to. So ask questions. That's what this resource is for. I want to help you make the best decision for you and to not just talk about the good, but also talk about the bad. So that's why I created this channel, to give you another option to talk to and help you make the best decision for you. So let's move on to number 5, not wanting to leave behind family or friends. If you're joining the military and serving on active duty, you will have to leave behind your family and friends and go where the military sends you. Sometimes you can get lucky and get stationed close to where your family and friends are, but other times you might not end up anywhere close to where you want to be stationed. One way to circumvent or go around this is to consider joining through the reserves or National Guard. When you join through a reserve or National Guard unit, you get to go back to that unit after you finish your basic and tech school, and you have more control over where you live. You still might have to get activated for either internal stuff within the United States, like with COVID or the Washington, D.C. inauguration. Those are both times that the National Guard was activated in the last year. Or you might deploy overseas, but you have more control over where you live. And so if you want to stay close to family and friends and you live near a base that has a National Guard or reserve unit, then that could be a good option for you. But if you are joining on active duty, then you're going to give up some of that control and you're going to go where the military tells you. And so that's one of the reasons that people sometimes don't want to join the military. So let's move on to number 6. You can't quit if you don't like it. The military isn't like a typical job. When you sign up to serve in the military, you sign a 4 or 6 year contract and you are committed to serving in the military. When you leave your military commitment early, that's called AWOL, absent without leave, and that is a no-go in the military. So if you don't like your boss, you don't like where you're stationed, it doesn't matter. You signed a contract with the military and you have to stay at the base and continue working until your commitment of 4 or 6 years is up. There are ways to sometimes shorten that commitment or switch the commitment from active duty to reserves, but you still have that contract in place, and it's not something that you can just decide that you don't want to do. You have to first get permission to change that contract and work with the military, and it's not always possible to do, and it's definitely not easy to do. So if you are considering joining the military, and one of the things that's holding you back is the commitment, because 4 years does seem like a long time, but it really isn't. But it is something to consider, because when you join the military, it's not something where you can put your 2 weeks notice in and leave if you don't like it. you're committed for whatever stint you signed up to serve, and it doesn't matter if you get sent on a deployment and you don't want to go. There's not a way to get out of your contract with the military without serving the time that you signed up for. So that's something that you need to consider when joining, that this is a commitment and it's not something that you can get out of easily. So let's move on to number 7. Sometimes the recruiting experience isn't the best. Another reason why I created this channel was because sometimes recruiters can either mislead or misunderstand or just not have the best intention for you. There are great recruiters, but all recruiters are working for the military, and so the military has certain jobs they need filled, and they have different qualifications and requirements that need to be done. And then sometimes for different situations, recruiters don't understand. When I was mentoring a young airman, I didn't know that she didn't do the correct paperwork to get stationed with her husband after she completed tech school. I assumed that because her husband was in the military and her recruiter knew that her husband was in the military, that he had her filled out the correct paperwork before she joined. But either the recruiter didn't know or forgot to have her fill out that paperwork, and she ended up doing a job that couldn't be at the base he was assigned, and they were separated for a long time. And there was nothing she could do about it because she had that contract that we already talked about in the last point of serving the certain number of years that she signed up for. And so it's important that you have someone who can help look out for the best interest of you, especially if there's a certain job you want to do, you have a certain life circumstance, like you're married to someone who's serving in the military, or you're planning to marry someone who's in the military, and getting the best advice and getting the correct paperwork filed before you join, because your recruiter most likely doesn't know about what we call dual military issues if they've never experienced it themselves, and they might not know the correct paperwork that you need to do. And then there's other situations where sometimes the recruiter might size you up based on what you look like or not help you get the job that you want. And so this girl's guide is meant to be a resource to help answer questions and get you connected with the right people and help you be more informed as you join the military, and hopefully make that recruiting experience not as bad. So let's move on to number 8. The military is male dominated. The military is male dominated. It doesn't matter what branch you join, the majority of people who serve in the military are men. This doesn't mean that women can't serve, that they're not welcome to serve, that they can't have a great career, but the military is male dominated, and in 2020 with the Vanessa Guillen case that happened over the summer, there was plenty of highlighting the problems within the military system with sexual assault, harassment, and rape. And so it is something that you should be aware of. When I joined the military, I didn't know the dangers that I could be in just by serving in the military and being in this male-dominated organization. The men that I worked with, I often saw as brothers, and I never would have expected them to betray me the way that some men do betray women in the military. And so I think it's important to be upfront and honest about the situation within the military. You can still have a great career. You can learn ways to be aware and how to watch for different situations and how to protect yourself. This doesn't guarantee that something bad won't happen, because it's not anyone's fault that any of these incidences happen to them. But if you take wise precautions, then you can protect yourself and help protect others around you. I think being aware instead of being ignorant is an important aspect to joining the military, and so we're going to dive deeper into sexual assault, rape, and harassment in future videos, and it is something that you really should be aware of when considering joining the military. I don't think it's a reason not to join the military, because I had a great experience and I was fortunate and never experienced sexual assault or rape, but it is something that does happen to women, and the military is working hard to change things. It seems that there is a new push to trying to change some of the systemic problems that are within the military, and hopefully things will get better over the next few years. And I think one of the biggest ways to start making change is to be open and to talk about it, so that's what we're doing. So let's move on to my last point on why people don't decide to join the military, and it basically comes down to they think it's honorable, but they don't know if the sacrifice is worth it. I think it's important to consider if you really want to serve in the military. It is a big commitment, and it's very honorable to serve in the military because you have to sacrifice a lot, and you have to be willing to sign up for those sacrifices and willing to do the job that the military gives you when you serve. So some people go through the video like I did of the pros and the cons, and they make a list and they write it out, and in the end the military is not for them. And I think that if you watch the pro video on reasons why people join the military, and now you watch the reasons why people don't join the military, you really should take the time to create a list and put your pros on one side and your cons on the other, and then you can even rate some of your pros to weigh heavier in this side and weight your cons and see where it lines up. It's pretty easy to see when you put things on paper on where your heart is and what you want to do. And so that's something that I use a lot when I'm trying to make a decision, because when it's stuck inside my head, I can't see it clearly, but then once I write it down on paper, and then I have a list of all the things of why, and then a few things I didn't, or all the reasons I shouldn't do it, and a few things of why I should, it makes it really clear to help me decide, and I think I would recommend that's something that you would do. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit about the negative aspects of the military and why some people either choose not to join the military or don't join the military because they're not qualified to serve in the military. Are there any cons that I missed that you think I should have added to my list? Put them down in the comments below, and we can have a discussion on what other disadvantages there are to serving in the military. Make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great week.